because palm oil is an issue in Indonesia. There is child labor in the palm oil supply chain. We know that. We can actively observe that. But that's not the only issue in palm oil. There are a range of issues that we wanted to explore. So with the help actually of the Dutch government, a grant by the Dutch government, we've embarked on a process of exploring this area and understanding it a little bit more. Basically, what we find, what UNICEF always looks at are the human development indicators in a particular area, and we're continuously trying to improve those. And when we see a prevalence of an agricultural business that overlays almost perfectly with an area where we have really low human development indicators, we know that there's a connection there somehow. And so the key is to try to find out what that is. So aside from child labor, we know that the palm oil industry has issues around maternal health and child care and education and water and sanitation and access to education. So we wanted to learn a little bit more about this. And in Indonesia, there are 4 million plus people involved in this particular industry, and about 2 million of them are women. So this is a really important stakeholder group for us. So we did some qualitative research with a bunch of different stakeholders. So this is not just big companies, but also NGOs, the communities, children, families, teachers, some of the brands, which is kind of where the original impetus for this came. The brands that originate back in Europe were concerned about their supply chain, and so with the help of the Dutch government and some of those brands, that's how we're able to do this research. The research did have some limitations. It was really focused on the let's say the formal sector. These are some of the biggest suppliers, and we recognize in Indonesia that 40% of the palm oil comes from the informal sector, very smallholder farms that are often maybe on the outskirts of the large plantations, but that potentially feed into the same supply chains. What we're really looking for are the root causes of the problems. So we found some main impact areas on children in this study were maternal protection, very low breastfeeding rates, a virtual lack of childcare in much of the informal sector, health and nutrition issues, huge incidence of stunting, and as was also mentioned in the last panel, stunting is a problem that a child will carry with them for the rest of their lives. You can't make that up. You can't just feed them more later and they'll get, they'll reach their full physical potential or their full mental potential. Also, chemicals, the forest burn, all these things that we've already talked about, these are areas. Water and sanitation. A huge factor in under 5 mortality are diarrheal diseases, and 6 out of 10 of those deaths are caused by a lack of access to sanitation. Education, not just access to education at the primary and at the secondary level is another factor. Child protection is another issue, and by this what we're principally talking about here is the child's right to have an existence, to actually be registered as a human being and therefore have access to the protections that society will afford them. 58% of children are registered in some of these rural areas. Well, that means that a whole lot of children are not registered in these areas, and there are barriers to that. It actually costs money to register a child. It's hard to do it. There's a lot of procedures. People don't really understand why, because they don't see any very interesting services for their children to access, so what's the point of registering? So again, these are very complex, multifaceted problems. And the government and the private sector can help play a role here. And then last but not least, child labor and also issues around young workers are other really important things. So yes, we're talking about young children, but we're also talking about young adults that are just entering the workforce, and some of these jobs are dangerous. There are chemicals, there are climbing trees, there's all sorts of things, and sometimes young people maybe don't have the best judgment or the ability to process things without the experience that us older people have, and so we need to be looking out for them as well.